So, uh, this video is going to be about just a random thing, a random creative thought that I've been having for a while, something that kind of jumped into my head when I saw this post on Reddit. What's the point of writing a story when someone else already did the concept more successfully? Now, you see a lot of posts like this all over various places on the internet where creators get together, and this isn't just about storytelling. This is about making movies or videos or anything really that's been done before. And I thought that I'd kind of throw my 2 cents in about this, because for a very long time when I first started writing and getting into creative stuff as a hobby, never with any intention of making any serious money off of it or being successful, really, just because I enjoyed it. I've tried a lot of things over the years, and I really would think about how original I was being, and I would really kind of scrutinize my own work through that lens. And eventually, one day, I came to the realization that originality, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, really, in my view. A lot of the most popular fiction that comes out and that people love is very derivative, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Now, you can have a preference for something that isn't derivative as a reader, and as a writer and a creative. Maybe originality is something that matters to you, and one of the primary goals for you doing something is you want to be original, and that's fine. But for most people, it's more of a barrier to entry for them to get over before they feel like they've made something valuable. And I think that this is just something that I want to make a video about, because it's something that I have a lot of experience with personally, and in fact, actually twice recently, something has come out that is practically exactly the same one-to-one. And these are things that I came up with myself that, are obviously based on my preferences, things that I like about fiction and whatnot, but they are things that someone else has done, and I know that they'll be done better than I probably could do, and they've kind of put a damper on the whole thing a little bit at the time, but I came to the realization that originality doesn't matter. Someone's always going to do the same thing, and also the reality is you don't know what's out there. Especially in the world of writing, there's so many different things, so many different stories, so many different books, so many different fan fictions on the internet, so many different creative projects going on at once. You don't know what does and doesn't exist. It's impossible for you to say for sure that the thing that you're writing or doing hasn't been done before, because it could have been. No matter how original you think you're being, you might just never find that work until afterwards, and you see in a comment section someone says, "Oh, I really like this, it's like this other thing." Now, you see posts like this all the time on Reddit, and when I just searched it quickly on RSS writing, there's another one here. I've been making a story for a while, and straight to a friend, they told me it already existed. Fear someone else will write it first. And this is a common theme, and I just want to talk about, I think I can valuably add to this kind of idea a little bit by talking about two things that I've worked on that this has happened to me with. So, and they're quite recent as well. So, I'll talk about them, and then I'll talk about basically why I think originality doesn't matter. So, the first thing I want to talk about is, both of these things, by the way, are going to be tabletop RPG based things that I was working on for a long time. And the first one is, I'll put some context in here before I start talking about it. But, I'm a big tabletop RPG player. I've been playing tabletop RPGs. It's been one of my main hobbies since I was 13 years old. And when I was about 15, I started running tabletop RPGs as the DM. And I started with World of Darkness. I started with Vampire the Masquerade 20th edition. We branched out. We played loads of other games. We played Call of Cthulhu. We played Wealth of the Apocalypse, Stars Without Number, Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. We played, this is just my starter group, we played a lot of different games. Played Dungeon World, we played Blades in the Dark, we played many others that I can't even remember now, loads of random little ones that we found on the internet, and it quickly became my main hobby, and I ran most of those systems. Fate is another one. Fate system. Yeah, the point is that I played a lot of tabletop RPGs. Now there reaches a point when you're a DM. I'll use that term because it's the most commonly used term, because D&D is the most popular tabletop game. When you are a DM, you run into a problem where a lot of people do anyway, unless you play rules as written, but in my experience not many groups actually do that in real life and practice. But generally you start to change systems and you start to add things in, you start to do things very differently. You build up your own Bible of homebrew rules, right? No matter what game it is you're playing. I don't think I've ever played any tabletop RPG exactly the way it wants to be played. We've always changed things slightly. And you get to a point, at least I did, especially with D&D, where it is more homebrew than not. Because homebrew, I just don't like D&D. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that because they're big D&D fans and it's the most popular tabletop RPG of all time. I really do believe that D&D is the worst tabletop game I've ever played, and I've never had less fun running a tabletop RPG than D&D in my life, and I've run a lot of D&D, and this really didn't properly hit me until about 3 years ago, 4 years ago I think it was now actually, because I ran so many tabletop games and I had so much fun with them, and I ran a multi-year Vampire the Masquerade campaign, and it was so fun and it was awesome. And those systems are great because they give you so much breadth of depth of freedom to be creative, because the systems are so simple and so elegant. And then you go back to D&D, where it has a different system for every little thing, when really everything should just be one kind of roll and all these other things. Like, why do we have saving throws when there are also skills? Doesn't make any sense to me, personally. So, and also with D&D, running D&D is like pulling fucking glass out of your testicles. It's awful. If you don't want to use preset monsters or anything like that, because the game is designed like a video game, the game balance is so desperately all over the place. And because of things like scaling health, which is a totally antiquated system, because of things like just how many abilities the player characters have through like spellcasters have versus marshals, for example, massive imbalance in the very core systems that exist, and just having to take far too much into consideration, it was the least fun I've ever had running a tabletop game. And considering I'm the kind of I don't run things that are out of the can. I don't run campaigns that are already made. For me, the joy of DMing is making my own world and making my own stories and my own characters. And that means I basically have to make 90% of the monster stat blocks myself, okay? And when you get to that level of doing everything yourself, you just look at this system of D&D's monsters and stat blocks and stuff and go, what the fuck is this? Why is it so complicated? Why is this so cumbersome? Especially when you go back and you play other games, and I've gotten to the point where, in my honest view, if it takes you more than 5 minutes to make a stat block for a boss monster or a serious monster, actually writing it down, not including thinking about it, something's seriously fucked. Something is seriously fucked with that system. And if you accidentally tweak a number wrong, do you then have to basically, on the fly, change the monster's health or do something like that, which isn't very good for the players and kind of takes away from their autonomy. So the system is just, it's basically for people who have no fucking life. That's my problem with D&D. It's a system for people who only do tabletop games, that's all they do, or it's for people who run very simple campaigns where it's like they go into a dungeon, they have 3 combat encounters. Whereas I'm not like that, right? For Vampire, I've run a multi-year campaign in a city with hundreds of characters, ongoing political struggles, different factions, different groups. Then within the different greater factions, there are minor factions within those factions that are all vying for control and in fighting one another, and they're all moving parts I have to take into consideration. You can't do this with D&D because of how leveling works and stuff. Like, you have to just randomly have like enemies with every character just have a shit ton of health for no reason and stuff like that, and all the player characters are just incentivized to actually just turn up and just kill that thing instead of actually interact with it in any meaningful fashion, because the reality is that the easiest way for them to resolve any problems is just by killing things. And I came to a realization that just D&D, I just fucking hate it. In the nicest way possible. If you like D&D and you love it, honestly, fucking awesome. Like, honestly, I commend you, because if you're a DM who's been DMing D&D for years and years and years, you've never played any other system, you probably don't know how green the grass is on the other side, because holy shit, is D&D rough compared to most systems. Just because it's needlessly complex, in my view. But that's enough ranting about D&D. The point of this is, I had homebrewed the ever-living fuck out of D&D, to the point where it is barely recognisable. It's not even really the same game anymore. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to make my own game. I'm going to make my own D20 system. I think the D20 system is flawed inherently. I think any system that has binary success is a flawed tabletop RPG system. Tabletop RPGs moved away from having success and failure as basically a binary a long time ago. You should have partial successes, critical successes, full successes, things like that. There should be, if you look at Genesis, for example, you even have other dimensions to how the dice rolls work with advantage, disadvantage. So, you can fail a roll but still have a successful side effect, things like that. These are all things that I consider to be baseline for a tabletop RPG, and the kinds of things that I was homebrewing the fuck out of D&D for. So you reach a certain level of homebrewing where you basically just have your own game entirely. So basically what I did is I went and made my own game. And this is the tabletop RPG that I've been working on, and I've called it The Beaten Path, because, it's like D&D, it's a fantasy tabletop RPG using a D20. It's been done before. We've got Pathfinder, we've got God knows how many other systems out there that do the same thing, and so I wanted to call it The Beaten Path, because it really is a beaten path. It's a path walked by many game designers throughout the past. And this is just my take on that thing. So, cut to about a year and a bit ago, I'm making this tabletop RPG, and I'm really into it, and I'm writing all day, practically all evening, every evening, and I've gotten to the point where the whole system's written up, I'm writing up the character classes, I'm going absolutely crazy. I've gotten to the point where, like, the Barbarian class, for example, that I've written up has about 3 times as much as D&D already has, and I'm just one person. So I'm really fucking going ham on this. Bit problematic for myself, to be fair, because I did get to the point where I was like writing the other class and I was like, shit, because I did Barbarian first, because I really want to work the martials in a way that I think works better than in D&D, and I really wanted to make them stand on their own feet the way Pathfinder does compared to spellcasters. And I kind of went to do the other ones. I was like, shit, they've got to have loads of shit now, otherwise it's going to be crap. So I had to force myself to write more than I otherwise would have done. Anyway, I write this whole game. As you see here, this is the whole game. This table of contents will not be the one that I actually use when I actually write out, but this is for me to get to every little thing in the system. This is like the basic stuff, mostly what the players will be reading, and other stuff as well. And the plan here was to release this probably for free at some point on the internet, just to get some eyes on it, kind of thing. It's a very basic thing to start off with. Then, before you know it, this turns up. DC20. And if you know what DC20 is, it's basically exactly what I'm doing. And I started working on this a long time ago, and I don't know when DC20 was announced. And credit to them, this looks fucking awesome, and I would play this over D&D any fucking day of the week. That being said, it's still a lot of things in it that I still am not a massive fan of with tabletop RPGs from D&D, but it's still a million times better in my view than D&D. And but these guys, they're making a very similar thing to me. It's a D20 thing, and they've already got all these big D&D content creators working on it and bigging it up and making it kind of work for their work, basically get eyes on it, kind of thing. Now, obviously, they're a team, and I'm just one guy. But this is exactly what I was doing for 3 years, and I won't lie to you and say I wasn't really fucking salty about it when I discovered this system. When did they start posting videos about it? About a year ago. There we go. So exactly about a year ago that they announced. And to be fair, probably writing for the same kind of thing at the same time, and that's great and everything. But there's lots of things that this system has that mine won't. So I realised eventually, after kind of giving up on it for about 2 months, realising, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. Because this is my own take on the system, and there's things that I like about D&D and things that I don't like. And what I do really like about D&D is the class fantasy of it. The idea that you are playing a specific kind of class, and you get that experience. That roleplay experience is tied to your class, and I do like that. And that's about everything I like about D&D. But the you know, I have problems with like the race system and things like that. Like I'm just personally removing that entirely. Like races aren't going to be a thing in the system that I'm writing up. If you want to play an elf, you just are an elf. You don't get anything for it. You just are an elf. You don't get any stat bonuses or anything like that. You're an elf. You're a person who's an elf, and you know, if the DM wants to give you a power for that or something that's part of their setting, that's fine, they can do that. I'll have a system in the book, like an optional system, quickly written up for just how to basically adapt abilities and stuff that are already into the book, into racial features, and you can just give them out based on race and stuff like that if you want to do that. But that's not going to be a system that I've written in, because this is going to be a setting agnostic system, is the idea. It's not going to be the kind of thing where, like, we predetermine parts of the setting. No, it's going to be the complete opposite, actually. It's completely going to be designed and encouraged for you to make your own setting and do your own thing with. So, you know, and in this game they have races, and I don't like races in D&D. I think they suck. I think if you want to play an elf, you should just be an elf. If you want to play a, you know, and then you and your DM can just fluff stuff up to make it make sense. If you want to, it's not necessary for there to be a whole system around it, in my view. But yeah, so that's just example one. So I was working for ages on a tabletop RPG, and then a far more successful equivalent turned up. And I could have just given up right then. I could have given up and gone, fuck it, they've done it, whatever, I'll just play DC-20. But I know, even though DC-20 to me looks phenomenal, and I really want to stress that I think it looks really great, and they're doing a really great job at taking all the things that D&D does and just de-shitifying it. But it's still not the system that I want to play exactly. And that's my goal. I want to play a system that does what I want, you know. And I strongly believe that if you write what you want, there will be people out there that want the same things as you. And there is an audience out there, and there are people who want to take part in that kind of creative, collaborative way of doing things. And, you know, that's one of the main things that I want to focus on my system, is a stronger collaboration between DM and player. I want... when the DM makes a world, I want the players to be part of that. I don't want... the idea is that the DM and the players work together to make a world. It's not that... And to make the races and how the magic works and all this shit. It's down to... It's not just gonna be the DM. It's gonna be a collaborative storytelling on every level, down to the world itself. The players and the DM work together to create that. And I really think that's really the beauty of tabletop RPGs for me, is that collaborative, creative process between the player and the DM. And that's what I want to focus on with this system as one of the main things. It's going to be about giving you as many options to do whatever you want, without having to worry about whether your build's going to work, about whether your character's optimal, whether or not the enemy has too much HP for you to beat them in a fight. It's going to be much more roleplay and story-focused than D&D, and that's what I want out of a tabletop game. I want the systems to take a backseat to the role-playing, and that is basically what I'm doing with this system. And that's not necessarily what DC-20 are doing. DC-20 are doing a more kind of crunchy D&D style set rules kind of system, and I think that's great. There's, you know, that's obviously what people love about D&D. Otherwise they wouldn't play it, right? So yeah. So Reason 1,000,001 why originality doesn't matter. Do you write what you want to write? Someone will always be doing what you're doing better or different. And the reality is, my view is that when readers see two things that are similar, they don't go, oh, that's this thing, but better. Okay? Most people who consume media aren't like that. They look at it and they go, oh, I like that, or I like that. I get to have my cake and eat it too. Oh, I get two. It's like, you don't go into a sweet shop and be like, oh my god, all these sweets are just shitty versions of the other sweets. No, people would be like, yo, look at all the sweets I can have, right? So, that's how I view that. And we'll go on to the next one, which is another tabletop RPG, and this one's going to be a lot quicker than me talking about DC-20 and how that disrupted my creative process with the idea of originality. So, the next thing, I don't have anything on the screen for it because there's not really any point, because it won't help illustrate what I'm trying to say. I might put some things on the screen in post, but at the moment there's not really any point. So the next thing is another tabletop RPG thing I was doing. So I'm a massive fantasy fan, but I'm also a big sci-fi geek as well. And I wanted to make my own sci-fi setting. So I was writing a tabletop RPG based around a setting. And I'll give you this quick rundown of the setting. It's probably never going to fully be completed, to be honest, at this rate. Maybe in the future. But as it stands, basically, this is kind of a setting that was based on, at the time, I was going through kind of a political doomer phase where I was like, the fucking mod's fucked, we're politically fucked, the environment's fucked, societally we're fucked, nobody cares about each other, we're fucked, economically we're fucked, the world is fucked, rich people are going to just ruin the world and be avaricious, and the environment's going to get fucked, we don't have time to be dealing with stupid interpolitical bullshit, and the world's going to be fucked, and everything's going to be fucked, and the world is fucked, and I was just really, really negative about the world in general, and I still am in some ways, but I'm a lot more hopeful than I was before. But this kind of setting that I was writing was really born of that angst that I was having, that existential angst at that time in my life. And this setting's basically a setting wherein everything that I feared about the possibility of the future came true. So it was called After Earth, and basically the idea of the setting was humanity fucked the world. The rich and powerful continued to reave the planet of its resources, continued to siphon wealth from the world. Equality between classes and people was never achieved, and the world continued on its current trajectory towards economic and environmental implosion, destruction, failure, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Okay? And basically, what happens is the world enters a basically ecological apocalypse, hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, and it turns out that the Elon Musks, the billionaires, the rich people of the world knew this was going to happen, so they were planning for this for a long time. By this point, kind of space travel is kind of a bit more advanced. FTL doesn't exist or anything, but and we're not at the point where we're colonizing planets or anything. But we are at the point where we can, get into space and create satellites and that kind of space stations much more efficiently. And the world goes to shit, and basically the rich create these things called enclaves, which are basically like militaristic bunkers, kind of like Fallout's vaults, and they live in them. And what they do is they enter basically a technocratic scientific crunch where all of the most powerful people in the world have pulled their resources together to survive the apocalypse, and they prepare and they get ready for the apocalypse to come because they know it's going to come, and they get ready and they realize that they can survive for about 120, 130 years basically after the world goes to shit. Okay, so they create these enclaves, and they basically just abandon the rest of humanity when things start to get really fucked, and the world just gets really fucked up ecologically. It's not really relevant, doesn't really matter because this is all background lost before the setting even exists. And essentially, They stay in these bunkers and they basically science for about 100 years. And they have a couple of scientific breakthroughs. So the first one is massive scientific breakthroughs in genetic modification. So that is the ability to basically create a new species by combining two species together, splicing kind of DNA together, that kind of thing. And one of the main things that they do is they basically take humans and they change them genetically so that they don't need to eat as much, so that they're more robust and they can survive the new environment of a dying Earth much more easily than they could before, much more reliably than they could before. And they're in their enclave, so they're safe, but they basically create basically take a bunch of humans in, genetically experiment on them, and create entirely different species and send them out into the world to go find things for them, do things for them, that kind of thing, in exchange for safety within these enclaves. And that's kind of the first scientific breakthrough. And the next one is a breakthrough in discovering another dimension that I called the extraverse in this writing planning kind of phase. The extraverse is like an unlimited sea of possibility. It's kind of like it's just another dimension, and things that exist inside of it, anything can exist inside of it. It's like a realm of thought. Think kind of like the warp, or kind of like in Warhammer 40k, kind of mixed with the void in Warframe, that kind of thing. And basically they realize that when you go into you can go into this, they create a portal that allows them to go into this other dimension. You can go into this dimension. If you move in this dimension, when you come out, you appear somewhere else in the galaxy completely randomly. It could be anywhere. You could move 1 centimeter and that's connected to a completely random place somewhere else in the physical realm. Okay, but what they work out pretty quickly is that it is randomly non-random. And what I mean by that is, if you go in there in exactly the same place, you go into this place and you move to that exact point in that other realm, when you jump out, you will always be in exactly the same place. So that means if I am in, say for example, a coordinate in the physical realm, and I go into it, then I jump into that other non-physical realm, the extraverse. I then move exactly 3 centimeters forwards, and I jump out. I'll be somewhere random in the galaxy that could be literally hundreds of thousands of light years away. Or, right, I can do that, and then I can move back and move exactly the same distance again, and jump out again, and I'll be back where I started. So they know that if you follow the exact same path, you always end up at the same place. So this creates a possibility for galactic expansion, but on a completely random scale. So it's not like you go in and you jump somewhere and you know where you are, kind of thing. You go in, you jump somewhere, you end up somewhere, you basically move a couple centimeters, you end up somewhere completely random in the galaxy, you basically note down exactly where you were when you made those jumps, and you can get back. Then, you basically explore that part of the galaxy where you've jumped out. Now, obviously, this is dangerous. You could end up in the sun. You could end up inside of a planet. You could end up next to a black hole, right? It's an extremely dangerous form of FTL, but it's the only form of FTL that humanity is able to crack by this point. And by this point, Earth is dying, and supplies are dwindling. So what humanity does is they get basically this culture that's basically grown, which isn't the same human culture that existed before, because it's a culture of a certain group of people within society that create their own culture within these enclaves over 100 years. So basically, they basically leave Earth on these giant ships. They're kind of like Ark ships, like Noah's Ark, basically, and they get the genome for every single living thing that they could find on Earth for gene splicing later on, and they basically each take a couple, like 10, 30,000 people, something like that, and they basically go off. And one of the arcs, just one, there's one for each part of the world. I didn't know exactly how many I wanted there to be, but I was thinking 5 or 6 different arcs, and they all go out into the galaxy, and they all basically find green worlds, and the idea is for them to all find a green world and a new place for humanity to live. Okay, and they use what they call the Exodus drive to do this. Now, the Exodus drive is what gets you into the extraverse, and basically, again, you can use it to randomly jump throughout the galaxy. And it allows you to continuously try and find a new place. And eventually they find a new home, and by this point the culture's kind of fucked up, and they've started to kind of, they realize that they're not, for a long time they decide that they're not going to find a green world. It takes them too long, and they've been going for hundreds of years and they haven't found an Earth-like world yet. So what they do is they basically start taking humans that are already on the ship, and they genetically manipulate them into completely different species that can survive non-Earth-like worlds, and then they colonize them with those people. The people who are running the ship, the Ark, it's become a kind of a cultural thing that you do not fuck with your genes. Only kind of the lower case of society will do that. So, you know, basically the poor people that they're getting through overpopulation, or people they don't really want, and they kind of just take them. They're like, we would get rid of you, but we're giving you an opportunity here. You can go down to this planet. And the whole setting, then hundreds of years later, you have entirely different alien species, but they're all not alien species. They're all strains of humanity, and the kind of what you end up with, what was called the Consortium of Man, which is basically just a technocratic, theocratic empire led by pure humans, which are the descendants of the kind of billionaires, the rich people of our world. And things have just gotten way worse, because by this point they've just found loads of green worlds, and these kind of pure humans live on these green worlds, but it's like a couple thousand per planet. And then everyone else is not allowed on these green planets. It's just for them. So imagine like the way the world is now, but like way worse. That's pretty much how things were in the saying, and it was all based on kind of my very fucked up way. Not fucked up, because I still think it's kind of true, but let's say less than charitable view of the rich and powerful in society. And how I think that they're steering a ship towards disaster, societally in the real world, and how if we let people like Elon Musk control the future of humanity, it won't be good. That is basically what the setting was based on, and then there was also like turns out within the extroverts there's like eldritch gods, and you end up with like space warlocks and space vampires, and also other supernatural shit. You got space magic, you've got all sorts of shit going on within the setting, and then there's also alien species which are maybe possibly implied to be the results of the other human arcs that went to different places and had very different outcomes, and that was kind of going to be the setting. And then Exodus happens, which is really ironic, because the setting that I was writing up, the very setting was going to be called Exodus After Earth, and it was going to be about how, you know, everything that I just previously mentioned happened, and lo and behold, the ex-creators of one of my favourite trilogies of video games, one of the big inspirations for me when it comes to sci-fi, is making a new game called Exodus, which is very similar plot-wise to what I just said, apart from it's the other way around, where the powerful humans become another species and the normal humans are slaves to them. And in my setting, the idea is you would play as these non-human species that, well, they are human, but they were originally human. But the idea is that this oppressive empire, this consortium of man, oppresses you on such a level that even your very genetic history is a result of their oppression. And, you know, you exist in this world as a second-class citizen, and you aren't even allowed on the green planets. The society is based around this concept of toil, where you work, and they have a religion about how like the races that aren't humanity basically are trying to make up for their sins and transgressions against the original Earth. Basically the society that exists have kind of the consortium of man, the pure humans, have basically gaslit humanity, the other species of humanity, into believing that the original Earth was actually destroyed by them because of their shitty behaviour. And that is something that the consortium of man have actually come to believe, by people like Elon Musk, who can't accept any responsibility, basically lying to the generations below them, and in order to hide from the responsibility of what they'd done to their beloved Earth. And that is basically where we end up. We end up with a very similar setting to Exodus, and it's being made by a group of writers that I can have more respect for, by a group of creators that I could not have more respect for. Actually, the original creators of the Mass Effect trilogy are probably one of my greatest group of heroes in the world as far as creatives go. I think the Mass Effect trilogy is one of my favourite series of games of all time, one of my favourite stories of all time, and to this day I think the sci-fi of Mass Effect is second to none. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I think the world is great. It's a perfect mix of like green skin kind of aliens, like just humans with different coloured skin, and completely original, completely weird and different alien races. It's a hodgepodge of all the things that make sci-fi great, and I really just love. It's got space magic, it's got everything. I really, really, really love Mass Effect. And yeah, they've gone and they created something exactly like what I had in mind. So, what does this teach us about originality? It teaches you that no matter what you do in life, no matter how creative you're going to be, no matter how original you think your idea is, no matter within the depths of your soul that you know that idea came from you and isn't you taking that idea from someone else is going to come up with a similar idea. Okay, someone else is going to come up with a similar idea, and it's up to you to not allow that to crush your creativity, because you are going to do it differently. You are going to do your own thing. You're going to put your own spin on it. Okay, do not let other people tell you that because what you made was similar to something that someone else made, that it's not as good. Okay, and that it doesn't deserve to exist is the worst thing. Okay, go out there, make things, do things. Don't let people tell you, okay, that your thing is just a different version of another thing. Okay, and even if you did, your starting point was reading something else and being like, I want to do something like that, that's still fine. That's still great. Originality doesn't matter. Some of the greatest works of fiction out there are just rip-offs of other things. Okay, even Brandon Sanderson, for example. Take him for example. I doubt he would deny that a shard blade is just a fucking lightsaber. I doubt that he would deny that shard plate is just fucking fantasy mecha. Okay, it exists. Okay, he's taken things that he likes and put them into his own work of fiction. He's made one of the most iconic series of fantasy books of all time. Okay, just because something is similar to something else doesn't mean you should not do it. Okay? Really, seriously guys. I've experienced this myself multiple times with things that I've put my heart and fucking soul into. Okay? Do not let something else existing ruin your creativity. Okay? Because right here I have a book. And that book is this one here. It is Exodus, the Archimedes Engine by Peter F. Hamilton. Quite a well-known sci-fi author. And what is this for? This is for the first book set in the world of Exodus, a major action-adventure RPG from Archetype Entertainment. The people I was talking about previously, okay? I'm going to go read this book. I'm going to see how similar it is to the ideas that I had. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be happy about it, because I'm going to be like, you know what? The ideas I had must have been good, because someone I really look up to came up with a similar idea, okay? That's how I'm going to choose to look at it, and that's how you should look at it too. That's how you should also look at it. Do not let originality, this obsession, this poisonous obsession we have with originality, destroy your creativity, okay? You should create for a desire to create, for a desire to do something, okay? For whatever reason that you have, okay? But do not let in my case, people you look up to destroy that, because that's not what they want to do. I guarantee you, if you wrote a series, I saw a post online about this guy saying, I had this whole idea for a Magitech setting, and then Arcane came out, and it's very similar to what I had in mind. Okay, I guarantee you, if you went and asked the writer of Arcane what they thought about your story idea, they would think it was great. And if you told them that you had decided you didn't want to do that thing because you saw their work of fiction, they would feel fucking awful. I guarantee you. they would probably encourage you to keep going. They would say, no, 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 do your own thing. Go do it. Go do it. Don't listen to what the other people are saying. Go do your thing. Okay? Because people who are genuinely creative are like that. Okay? I'm sure there are lots of shitty people out there that aren't like that, but generally, in my experience, creative people are like that. They can be very vindictive. They can be very critical and very picky about the things that they like and whatnot. You know, that's the dark side of nerd culture, and it is very real and it does exist. But don't let your creativeness be hampered by that shitty underbelly of creativeness, because I guarantee you, the vast majority of the time, the people that you look up to or the people that you were inspired by would not be that way with you. And also, you should not allow your creativity to be stemmed by anything. Let it out. Let the beast out the cage. Go on Wattpad and write that trashy fanfiction that you always wanted to. Write that epic fantasy setting that is very similar to Lord of the Rings. Go do it. Go do what you want to do. Okay? And don't let this obsession with originality poison your creativity.